Have you ever stumbled in your bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to get from one place to the other, but not really sure where you are, feeling your way through the dark? Maybe you stub your toe on the corner of your bed, or you hit your shin on the side of something that someone left for whatever reason. You just need to get from one location to the other, but it turns out to be a very painful ordeal. This is how a lot of days on projects can feel for us, right? We're trying to get from one spot to another, and we know where we need to go, but what should be a simple ordeal turns out to be quite difficult. And it's not for a lack of effort. Everybody's doing good things on projects, but it's just that not everybody has a clear picture of where things are and where we need to get to, and the detailed steps and processes to get there. Some people end up like they're kind of trying to feel their way through the dark, trying to get to where they need to on projects. Now, we know that projects are complex. There's a lot of things going on. The days of electromechanical relays are long gone. Today's projects are much more complicated. They're PLC based, they've got complex control networks, everything's interconnected, and it takes a lot more effort to make all this stuff work. And there's just an immense amount of information on projects that it's too much on a daily basis to manage, for any one person to manage. We need the right systems, we need the right tools and processes to follow to get through our complex projects. There's way too many details to keep track of using paper and spreadsheets, and there's just so much time and money at stake on projects that we need to make sure that we're using the most state-of-the-art tools and most efficient methods to ensure that we're able to complete our projects on time and on budget. We also know that a lot of project performance is poor. From the recent studies done by Professor Bent Flivberg from the University of Oxford, he's compiled a database of over 16,000 projects of all different types from all different industries. And from his analysis of these 16,000 projects, less than 10% of these projects are on time and on budget. So out of the past historical projects in the last several decades of 16,000 projects, 9 out of 10 of them are late and over budget, and this is just not acceptable. We need to be doing better at projects to meet our cost and schedule objectives. When projects are incurring these cost overruns, these could be government-funded projects, these could be our taxpayer dollars that have to increase to pay for these cost overruns, or a company bottom line is affected where they have to fund additional millions or billions of dollars for projects that go over budget. When the company bottom line is affected, we know where those costs go. They go to the consumer goods that we pay for, the fuel that we purchase, the electricity we consume, and everything else in society that has to absorb these additional costs due to project cost overruns. So when it comes to project outcomes, we need to define what is the end project goal. And in all cases, in its simplest form, the goal of all projects is to deliver contract-compliant projects that are on time and on budget. This has to be every project's primary goal and must be everyone's number one priority to achieve on projects if we want to successfully complete our projects. And I think you can agree that in its simplest form, all projects have this goal to be delivered contract-compliant, on time, and on budget. Would you agree? So once you understand the ultimate end goal of your project, then we need to set up the process to follow and the tools that are needed in order for the project team to achieve the ultimate end goal of the in-service date being on time and on budget. And in the case of complex projects, the process to go through is our commissioning and startup process. That would be the last 25% of the project process for construction completions, commissioning completions, and startup to achieve our ultimate end goal of project in service being on time and on budget. The other item being the tools that are required to manage the last part of the project, the last 25% of the project, this complex phase to get to your project in service date. And in that case, those are the CMS software tools needed to manage the last portion of our project to achieve our project goals being on time and on budget. So when 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget, it's clear that we need a new way to complete projects. The old processes and the old tools are no longer working or have never worked in the past. If we're still using old commissioning processes, if we're not using the most cutting edge tools, then that leads to 9 out of 10 projects late and over budget. So I think you can agree that we do need a better way to complete our projects. So by the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you all the new CSU processes that are being used on projects. I'm going to show you all the new CMS software tools that are being used on projects to enable your project teams to be able to complete their projects on time and on budget. When they're empowered with these processes to follow and tools to use, you have a much better chance of achieving your project end goals of being on time and on budget. So this presentation is for you if you're currently using some of the old outdated tools that were used from the electromechanical relay days. If you're still stuck using paper and spreadsheets to complete the last portions of your project, then this presentation is definitely for you. Or if you're not sure if you're using or following the industry best CSU processes for your projects, maybe you're taking shortcuts or missing steps or don't have the most up-to-date processes to de-risk your project, then this presentation is definitely for you. However, this presentation is not for you if you really just want to stay stuck with the way that you're currently doing projects and continuing with the way that it's always been done, then this presentation isn't going to help you. If you want to gamble with the end of your project completion, if you just want to roll the dice and see how the end of your project turns out, if you meet your dates, if you meet your cost and schedule objectives, then this presentation, again, isn't going to help you. If you're really fine with your projects being late and over budget, you have no problem going back to your executive and asking for more money right at the end when it's late. If you're comfortable with those processes of trying to get some more money and you're allowed to do that, then if your project is allowed to be millions of dollars over budget and nobody's really going to put any pressure on you, then this presentation isn't going to help you either. So if you do want to avoid any of these mistakes though, stick around and I'll show you how through the next few slides. So the first thing to mention is that projects are complex, and like we talked about, they are getting more and more complex. So I do want to mention that if your past projects have failed, that it's not your fault. Projects are complex. There's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of people involved, and it does take a lot of effort to try and achieve our project and goals. There's a lot of confusing information out there, a lot of industry-specific knowledge that might be required, and it's hard to navigate through all this information to know what's right and what's wrong and what's best for your project. So many times if you're trying to decipher this information, it can keep you getting stuck, or it can send you down the wrong path on your project, and that's where it ends up late and over budget. So these projects are complex, and I just want to say that if that's been your experience in the past where your projects have not gone well, that it's not your fault, but it's okay. We're going to go through some of the details in the next few slides, and I'll help you with what's required to get through this complex part of the end of your project and how you can successfully deliver your projects on time and on budget. So my name is Paul Turner. I'm a professional electrical engineer and a project management professional. I've been working on complex projects for a few decades now. I've worked in the aerospace industry, delivering satellites to orbit. I've worked in the power industry, working on a 200 megawatt hydroelectric generating station here in northern Manitoba. More recently, I've worked on a 2300 megawatt HVDC link in Manitoba here, a 1400 kilometer line bringing power from the north to the south. I'm also working in the wastewater treatment plant industry, upgrading and expanding a wastewater treatment plant to new environmental standards. So I have worked on several complex projects, and through this experience, I originally started out as well, kind of feeling my way around in the dark, not sure where I needed to go, and bumping my toe and getting very frustrated, kind of stumbling through it to figure out how to complete projects. But through my experience, I've seen what works and what doesn't work in order to achieve project in service date. Some of the projects I've worked on have been an absolute disaster. Everything wrong you can imagine for commissioning, all the things that you shouldn't do have been done on these projects. So I've seen the worst of projects, but some of these projects have gone spectacularly well, multi-billion-dollar projects where we met our cost and schedule objectives, and it was clear to see what worked on those projects. So I do have a wide range of experience on what not to do and what does work to complete projects, and that's what I want to share with you in the next few slides here is what does it take to complete projects on time and on budget, and what are the processes and what are the tools to do so. So there's three aspects of successful project completions. The first aspect is project team, the second aspect is CSU processes, and the third critical aspect is CMS software. All three of these are required in order for projects to be successful, and if any one of these is missing or more than one of them is missing, then your project will suffer and it will be very challenging for you to get to your project in service date on time and on budget. So let's go through each one of these in a little bit more detail and I'll show you how this works. So the first one here, project team. Projects definitely require people. A group of wicked smart people that can accomplish great things together. There's just no other way about it. Projects require great teams of people to accomplish great things. They talk about the pending upcoming artificial intelligence revolution. Well, these are very complex thought process jobs that require deep thought to come up with deep and complex solutions. And the AI just isn't there yet. Maybe in the future it gets much better, but right now and for the foreseeable future, I don't think technology is going to take over these complex jobs. We need smart people to work on projects to be able to build the infrastructure that we need for society. And I think that you can agree, projects need people, that there's just no way to complete projects without people, and we need great teams to do that. The second aspect is your commissioning and startup process that you follow. This is the underlying structure that is required to complete projects. If we think about the beginning of project in design to kind of get projects started, contracts awarded, and things rolling on site, then we have the middle phase of the project to get everything installed. The last portion of the project, say the last 25% of a project, is the process to make all of this come together, complete the installations, complete the commissioning activities in order to meet that single point in time of your project and service date on time and on budget. That's what we mean when we refer to the CSU process. Now, commissioning is complex, and a lot of people working on projects don't have a deep understanding of what commissioning is, or they do have maybe a very limited understanding or no understanding at all. Maybe your projects only have a few core commissioning experts that understand how to get through this process, but when only a few people on your project know how to complete the last 25% of your project, it makes it really challenging for the project team to pull everything together to meet your in-service date. And this is really one of the reasons that most people feel that they're moving around in the dark, is commissioning is kind of treated as a black box, that group at the end of the project where they know how to make their magic happen. They know what's required to get to your project and service date, but not too many people know what's in that black box or how their input activities influence the ability to get to the end of the project. So the CSU is really your pathway to completion, the end of the project to meet your project in service date. The stages of commissioning and the stages of completions that are required, what takes place during each of these stages. It's the defined gated milestones, your certificates and forms that are required to get through this process, get everything signed off, and get everything completed. It really defines the last 25% of your project and how it will be successfully completed. Now, like I said earlier, everyone on the project, even during early stages of your projects, they need to understand what this final completion process looks like. Without having any knowledge or understanding of completions and commissioning, then they're really just moving around in the dark, kind of guessing on what they need to do or how they contribute to meeting the project in service date. And it's no way to organize, coordinate a large team, a group of people to get to the project in service date if nobody really knows how the end of your project is going to take place and how you're going to achieve that project in service date. You can think of the CSU process kind of like the yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz. The yellow brick road is your clearly defined path to get to your project end date, your in-service date on time and on budget. Once you have that clearly defined yellow brick road, then everybody knows the path to follow and knows exactly what they need to do to keep the project on path to completion. The building blocks to finish your project really need to be defined in a very specific way during that completion process. The specific sequence of activities that are required to get from point A to point B, to get from somewhere within your project to the project end goal during commissioning and startup to achieve your project in service date. And there is a very specific sequence of activities required to follow properly down the yellow brick road, where you know that you're going to need power first before you can do any of your HVAC commissioning and startup. There's a very technical sequence of activities that are required where you need one subsystem, then the next subsystem, then the next subsystem. And if you mess any of these up, if you deviate off this path, if you get anything that isn't following your yellow brick road, then your project will deviate off path. And that's when we end up with projects that are years late and millions of dollars over budget because the yellow brick road wasn't clearly defined, and others maybe on the project didn't understand it and are veering off path. Another thing about the CSU process is it must be made simple, which can be challenging because commissioning is definitely complex. So how do you take a complex process like commissioning and how do you simplify it so that everyone on the project can understand what their role is and how to contribute to the project end date. The commissioning and startup process that you execute on your project can't be built on a shallow understanding or an inaccurate map of what's really going on at the end of your project, what's really taking place during commissioning and startup. Those details need to be built into your project processes, but also simplified so that others on the project can understand them as well, so that they can understand how to get to the end of the project. Your commissioning and startup process will not help you and your project team if it's complicated or if it's inaccurate or if others on the project can't understand it. If it's complicated, then it may not actually be something that you can implement on your project. Again, it's seen as a black box at the end of your project. Nobody knows what's in that black box or what they need to get to as inputs to that black box. It's just kind of treated as an unknown for someone else to figure out, or that core group of commissioning people to figure out. But your entire project team isn't working towards that same end goal because they don't even know what's in that black box. It needs to be simplified and conveyed to others on the project so it's easy for everyone on the project to understand how or what that clear-cut path is to get to your project in service date. And I think you can agree that if it's too complicated, it's not going to happen on your project. We need to make these processes simple for you and your team and everyone to understand so they don't get lost along the way and they can get to the project in service date on time and on budget. So the way to do that, to simplify the process, is with CMS software. This is the tools that are needed to simplify the CSU process and allow others on the team to understand what's going on and how to achieve the project end goal. Think of your CMS software as the bridge that connects your project team with the CSU process. It gives everyone the visibility of what the yellow brick road path is at the end of your project and how their activities contribute to meeting your project in service date. It also gives the status of where everything is at the end of your project. If you've got the last 25% of your project, but nobody really knows what's going on during that period of time because information's buried in a spreadsheet or lost in a paper sign-off or something like that, then nobody has that visibility to know where things are at or what needs to be progressed to get to your project in service date. CMS software simplifies that to give everybody the status of exactly where every detail is on the project so they can contribute to the project's end goal of success. You do need to be wise when you're selecting your CMS software tools because there's over 20 different tools, software vendors out there that you can use on your project, but you need to be selecting the right CMS software that is specific to your industry and specific to your project needs, specifically so that you're getting the right reporting out of the software and you can see in real time what the information is and what decisions do you need to make so that you can ensure everything stays on the right yellow brick road path to completion to get to your project in service date. It's certainly challenging because commissioning is a complex problem to solve, but CMS software helps to take out some of that complexity and put together a simple story, a simple message, a simple path for your project team to get to the end so that everybody's walking down that same path together and can get to your project in service date. So let's take a look at where you're at on your projects. Maybe we can look at your projects and simplify some of what you're doing, or we can help you get a clear CSU process and CMS software tools to monitor that process towards the end of the project. Does this sound like a good idea? We'll go through some examples here and we can see where you're at on your project and maybe what the next steps are to achieve your end goal of your project. It's definitely critical to simplify your project completions and simplify your commissioning processes so that your project team can execute what's required in the last 25% of your project to meet your project objectives. Everyone on your team will know what to do and they need to know what to do, so their efforts are always contributing to progressing down the yellow brick road to get to your project in service date, and everybody knows how to get to the end. When they see that clear path to follow to get to the end, everybody's working on that same path to completion to achieve the end goal of the project. So on projects that have great people and have great processes but are lacking the tools on projects, when you're missing the CMS software aspect, it's very easy for your project team to become misaligned. Without that clear visibility of what the end of the project looks like, everyone might have their own understanding of how this takes place. And I see this often on projects is people feel that pre-commissioning means this, or they feel that commissioning means that, and these items are a prerequisite here and not a prerequisite there, and nobody's working towards the same common objectives to get through this process. It's very common, and I see it on all projects, that the project team is misaligned, working on different things rather than that clear, focused effort of exactly what needs to be done. Also, without the right CMS software tools, there's limited visibility. Nobody, even if we did have an agreement on what the process is, nobody knows where the portions of the project are through that process to get that status and know what are the roadblocks, what are the holdups, what are the things we need to work on to get through the next step of the process here, to get through the gated commissioning process, form signed off so that we can get to the next step. Everybody's working on something different on projects, and it becomes extremely difficult to coordinate project teams. Small teams, large teams, there's often quite a few people working on these projects, and it becomes very complicated to try and coordinate everybody to be working on the right things in the right order to achieve your project end date. It's pretty easy for people to be working on whatever they think might be the right priorities. In their mind, they're working on the right things, but they don't have the information to know exactly what are the next steps down the path to get to completion. And it's not necessarily their fault. They're doing good work, they're performing good activities, but it's just not necessarily the right things to focus on the clear objective end goal of the project. When this happens, when project teams are kind of scattered or splintered or working not necessarily on the right things, it's very easy for projects to become late and over budget. And we see this often on projects where project teams are kind of, again, feeling their way through the dark. They don't entirely know how to get to the project in service date, and they're trying their best, but they're not necessarily focused on the right goals. Now this poor guy, he's going to sure have a tough time completing his task. He's got the wrong tool for the job. He'll get his hole drilled eventually, but you can definitely see there would be better tools that would enable him to do his job a lot better. He'll still get it done, but not nearly as efficient as he could as if he had the right tools. So we want to make sure that the teams have the right tools, particularly in this case the CMS software, to make sure that they're able to achieve their project objectives. So for projects that have great people and have the right tools in place, but they're lacking the CSU process, well, your tools, your CMS software isn't going to be much help to guide your project team. If they don't have a well-defined CSU process in there, then really your project team isn't going to know how to progress or how to use the software without knowing what the process is to follow. The CMS software tools that exist are very powerful and very flexible. They can do all sorts of great things for your project, but they do require your project-specific stages that are specific to your industry and your project of how you proceed through commissioning and startup and what takes place during each stage. So this project-specific process that applies to your industry and your project needs to be loaded within your CMS software. That is the underlying CSU process of how the last 25% of your project is going to be completed. Those project-specific details do need to be modeled in every small little detail within your software so that people could then use the software to progress to the end of your project. When this doesn't occur, teams don't have that common understanding of what is the path to completion. They're lacking that knowledge and what are the steps to get there. And if your CMS software isn't loaded correctly, it doesn't define the CSU process, it doesn't give people the visibility that they need, then it quickly gets dropped. People just get frustrated with it and stop using it. And like 9 out of 10 projects, it just becomes a scramble at the end of your project to figure out what needs to be done and figure out how to get to your project and service date. And again, 9 out of 10 projects, this leads to your project being late and over budget. Months late, years late, and millions or billions of dollars over budget when you don't have the right CSU process defined to complete your project. So back to the Wizard of Oz, you can see at many points in the project you're going to have decisions to make as which road to go down, which yellow brick road to follow. And without a defined CSU process, you're really just guessing. You don't know which path to follow. One of those yellow brick road paths could take you to your project and service date on time and on budget. But if you take the wrong turn and follow the wrong path, that's a $2 million delay and many months or years late. Then how do you know which path to take if you don't have a clearly defined process of how to get to the end? So for projects that have the right CSU processes in place and the best software tools enabled but don't have any people, well, like we talked about earlier, projects require people. End of discussion. We can't complete projects without great people, great teams of people collaborating to do great things together. Until the AI develops any further, we need great people, and this is going to be the case for many years, I believe. So nothing more can be said. We need great people. So these are the three critical aspects of the integrated project completions framework, being project team, CSU process, and CMS software. And we talked about some examples that maybe your projects are suffering from if you don't have a great project team or the right CSU processes or the best CMS software. Any one of those missing or struggling will affect the outcome of your project and your ability to meet your project and service date, with 9 out of 10 projects being late and over budget. So the goal of these three aspects of integrated project completions is projects delivered on time and on budget. So we've defined what your project end goal success is. We know that we want contract compliant projects and we want our projects delivered on time and on budget. That is the goal of what we're trying to achieve here on projects. We've also determined that achieving your project end goal success is determined by both the CMS software tools that you have in place, as well as the CSU process that you follow to get to your project in service date, the last 25% of your project. So with these 2 points, then how would it ever be possible to complete your project on time and on budget when you have not empowered your project team with the best CSU processes and the most advanced CMS software tools required to get to your end goal of your project? It's just not possible. When one or more of those are missing, it's just not, you're not able to, your project team is not able to get to your project in service date on time and on budget. We're going to be deviating off the yellow brick road, taking a longer path that's going to end up in cost overruns and schedule delays, that it's just not possible when one or more of these items are missing. And with 9 out of 10 projects late and over budget, we know that we need better project outcomes. When there's millions or billions of dollars at stake on projects, this is big money. This is taxpayer money or company money, and there's too much on the line to gamble with your project completion, as it's irresponsible not to take the proper steps, get the right tools, get the right processes in place to reduce or eliminate project overruns on projects. We need to be implementing the most advanced tools, the most advanced processes available to us to protect our projects from ending up late and over budget. And this is exactly why I created the Commissioning Academy, to help project teams implement the best tools and the best processes to make the last 25% of projects go much smoother, so we can reduce or eliminate chances of project overruns. At the Commissioning Academy, we work with project teams to get the best CMS software and the best project-specific CSU processes implemented to empower their project teams to achieve the project end goal. Our clients are more and more demanding projects being on time and on budget, and we help our clients, we help our project teams get the processes in place, get the software tools enabled on their projects to set them on the path to success so that they can deliver projects on time and on budget. The first thing we do is work with clients to set up the best CMS software on their projects. There's over 20 CMS software vendors to choose from, and they apply to various different industries and different types of projects, but how do you know which one to choose? So we've done all the research, we've talked to each software vendor, and we know the strengths and weaknesses of each one and which ones are better for certain industries than others. With a bit of information about your project, when you answer a few questions about exactly what your goals are on your project, the types of projects that you work on, then we can easily recommend which one of these 20 is the best for your projects. And this is something we can easily help with. It's since we've already done all the research, we know the answers pretty quick when you tell us a little bit about your project. The second thing we work with our clients with is we work with the project teams to review what are the CSU processes that you have set up in your project, and is there anything better that we can do to implement the right steps in the process to de-risk your project and ensure that the last 25% of your project is simplified as best as it can be, to give the rest of the project team that visibility on what needs to be done. If there's activities that can be advanced earlier in the project that maybe reduce risk or don't necessarily defer risk to the end of the project, we look at your CSU processes and see what are the best practices that you should be doing to de-risk your project to meet your project end goals. Once we've defined and helped project teams define what this CSU process is that's best for your projects, we work with project teams to get these CSU processes loaded into the CMS software so that they then have the tools in place to manage industry best commissioning processes to complete projects. In a lot of cases, there may be some really smart commissioning experts on our clients' project teams, but there may be others on the team that have a limited understanding or don't have that depth of knowledge of what the commissioning process is. So we work with project teams to provide training as well, where we show project teams the fundamentals of commissioning. What is the in-depth steps of the process to go through? The commissioning workflows is what takes place during each stage of commissioning. How are those stages progressed on your project? One thing that a lot of projects or project teams need is a little bit of help defining how to systematize your project. So what are the best practices in breaking down the systems and subsystems on your project to go through the various commissioning workflows? We work with project teams to help sequence and schedule all of these commissioning activities, and then we get all of this detail, the end 25% of projects, the sequence and schedule to get to your project in service date. We get all of that loaded into the CMS software so that teams are then empowered to monitor and manage the process to get to your project completion date. We also have components on mechanical commissioning, electrical commissioning, automation commissioning, and some of the best practices for some of those discipline-specific portions of your project with regards to maybe some of the more complex aspects of automation commissioning, what's required for bench testing, what's required for integrated factory acceptance testing, how to structure these pre-activities off-site so that on-site testing goes much smoother and our complex integrated control systems aren't the holdup at the end of the project that cause delays at the end. So let's review a couple scenarios here. The first scenario I want to review is that your decision here is not to work with the Commissioning Academy to fix your project completions. If your project is like 90% of projects, which I'm sure it is, then if you're one of those 9 out of 10 projects, your project would be late and over budget, continuing with your current practices for completions of your project. And let's assume in this scenario that your project is 2 months late and it is $2 million over budget. So by not participating in our Commissioning Academy program and getting the best processes and best tools in place, your project is going to end up like 90% of others, and let's say it's going to be $2 million over budget, and that's an additional $2 million that you need to find, go to your board, your executive, your project sponsors, whoever that is, and request an additional $2 million to finish your project. That's scenario number 1. Now let's consider scenario number 2. You do decide to invest with Commissioning Academy, and we work together, we fix your CSU processes, we get you the best CMS software set up on your projects, and maybe you've got 20 or so team members on your project team that need some help understanding this complex commissioning process, and they proceed through our training that we help them understand what this process looks like. So because you've got the right tools in place, you've got the right processes set up, you've got a knowledgeable team, you're able to complete your project on time and on budget, and you don't have to incur that project overrun of $2 million. You've really saved your project $2 million by participating in our Academy program and allowing us to help you and your project team be successful. By investing a small fraction of that amount with the Commissioning Academy, you've saved your project millions of dollars. It's great insurance to protect the outcome of your project and help your project team achieve your project in service date. What we really need to be doing is breaking some of the outdated project norms. Habits are really hard to change, especially when it comes to projects, especially when it comes to the construction commissioning industry, and especially when it comes to large project teams. These industry norms become ingrained in projects and the people that work on projects. When you're working on your next project, it's habit to default what you did on the last project because that's really all you know. You don't know of a new way or a better way. Sure, there was probably some lessons learned that were done from the past project, but those were quickly filed away and forgotten about. And the large project team, the narrative within the industry defaults everybody to doing the same on the next project. That's what we really need to break on projects, because the problem is 90% of projects are late and over budget. So the industry norms and the way it's always been done doesn't work, and it's hurting projects. We need to break out of these industry norms and point project teams in a different direction towards success, and how to complete projects, the right yellow brick road to follow to get to project and service date. It's certainly challenging because it's a big industry and there's lots of depth of knowledge of how things have always been done, but we need to steer people down a different yellow brick road to get to project success. Really, we need to point people down that yellow brick road that 1 out of 10 projects is following to get to project in service date on time and on budget. And that's what we need to break, is some of those bad habits of always doing it the way it's always been done. Now I can end this presentation right now and I can go enjoy the rest of my day. I'm already successful with completions and commissioning. I know how to do this successfully and it works for me very well on projects. But this isn't really about me. This is about you. If you leave now, you might think you've learned some great information about some tools to investigate or some different processes to follow, but my guess is that your project team, by tomorrow or next week, you already have slipped back into the way it's always been done, into the normal project routines, right? It's just so easy to continue in that same habit. You would just default to do what you've always done on projects, and that's what most people will do. People that have worked on projects for a long time, or people that are new to projects, they'll just kind of default with the group of how it's always been done. And that's why most projects are late and over budget. But because I don't want your projects to waste money, I don't want them to be late and over budget, I'm not going to let you go back to your old habits of completing projects late and over budget. I need to make sure that your projects are successful by breaking some of those past outdated project norms and some of those past habits. If you really want lasting change on your projects, you and your project team need repeated exposure to the full system of the right processes to use and the right tools to have in place. And that's what you and your project team get when you join our Commissioning Academy program. So let me help you break some of those old bad habits and get your project team pointed in the right direction for on-time completion of your projects at your project and service date. Now the choice is really yours. You have two choices you can make here. You can do nothing and you can continue with the way your projects have always been completed, the way that 9 out of 10 projects are completed, and you can risk your project completion. You can risk the millions of dollars that potentially could be cost overruns on your projects. But these millions of dollars, while it may not be your money, it's certainly your project's money or your organization's money, or maybe it's taxpayers' money, and you have to treat this like it's your own and not let your project's money go to waste. We can't incur these cost overruns on 9 out of 10 projects. We all pay for project overruns in the taxes we pay, the fuel that we purchase, or the electricity that we consume, and your project overruns are indirectly costing everybody money, costing you more money, costing me more money, costing society more money, and we just can't allow this to happen. So the second choice you have is you can take the next step with me, the next step with Commissioning Academy. You and your project team can be empowered with the right tools and the right processes that you need to successfully complete your projects at a fraction of what your project overruns will cost. So the choice is really gamble and take a guess and probably pay millions of dollars in cost overruns or your project, or take a very small portion of that, a fraction of the potential cost overruns, invest in Commissioning Academy, and give you and your project team the best chance of success to meet your project end goal of meeting your in-service date on time and on budget. And you can get started for free with our 3-day mini course that tells you a bit of the fundamentals of commissioning and gives you a pretty good idea of what our Commissioning Academy program is about. So click the link below this video, enter your name and email, and you can get started right away with the 3-day mini course. Thanks for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in the mini course.